Jimmy, it's the national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the Alabama Crimson Tide playing against the Bulldogs of Georgia. By the time you hear this, the game will be over. There'll be a crowned champion. I already know who the champion is going to be. I've actually read the script, and the script told me exactly who it's going to be. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, though. I think it's fair for me not to do that to you all, even though you won't see this until after it's done, so it won't be a spoiler. But there was some very interesting stuff that came out during the pressers. Nick Saban and Kirby Smart decided they needed to sound off on regulation around name, image, and likeness in college football. They're saying you're going to have the haves and have-nots. That was more so from the mouth of Kirby Smart, and the separation that is already there is going to grow larger. The schools that have the capacity and the ability and are more competitive in NIL market are going to be schools that step ahead on top of other schools. So I don't want recruiting decisions to be based on that, but ultimately a lot of young men want to make their decision based on that. And Nick Saban followed up with, he thinks it's a positive thing for kids, and he didn't think them earning money was a bad thing, but he's concerned about them being lured to schools because of it. I don't think that was the intention. I don't think that it would be the NCAA's intention. I think we probably need some kind of national legislation to sort of control that to some degree. I think that there will be an imbalance relative to who can dominate college football, and that's if that's not regulated in some form or fashion. So, Jimmy, combining name, image, and likeness to the complaints that people are having, like Dabo Swinney, about the transfer portal, players moving around, making decisions, and leaving because of better, the grass is greener on the other side.
And the money.
Do you think that there needs to be more regulation over both, and that this will damage college football? Is it fair to say that NIL and the transfer portal will ruin college football?
Well, I'll go more the NIL route. 3 or 4 years ago, when the discussions about players getting paid or players being able to make money off their name, image, and likeness really started to catch steam, part of why I said I didn't want that to happen was because it was not. I didn't think the NCAA either was going to not regulate it, or they wouldn't know how to regulate it appropriately in order to, I guess, have it structured in such a way where these concerns aren't very concerning at all that these coaches are now talking about. So I've always been in favor of regulation, but the problem is the NCAA doesn't know how to regulate hardly anything. That when the NCAA generally makes a decision, is generally either the wrong decision or not exactly the best decision that they could make.
It's in the interest of themselves.
It's in the interest of themselves. So yes, I think that there does need to be some type of regulation with this for a multitude of reasons, but I think this machine is already going. It's already picking up steam. It's already out of control, out of the control of the NCAA. So it's hard for me to see an avenue for them to then step in after the fact and say, here's how we need to regulate it. Whereas they've let the schools and the players do whatever they want up until this point. So, yes, it does need regulation, but I don't see how the NCAA could possibly do that at this stage in the game. So maybe you could help me understand how they could step in and do this.
It's a good point. So I'm going to say that the NCAA can't really – there's not much you can do unless you start to cap people's money, which this is a free country. Why are we capping people's money in the capitalistic – I mean, seriously.
You don't cap capitalism.
It's a free market. You don't cap capitalism. No cap to the cap of capitalism.
Yeah, no cap.
So you can't do it. I think both of them are wrong. Now, I think the comments that both Kirby Smart and Nick Saban made was kind of a warning shot to everybody. So Saban said that he thought this was a good idea, and he kind of made this one point that they're going to get some people are going to get bigger, and a lot of schools are going to lose out. I think it was more so him trying to warn everybody. If you give me these capabilities and I can do this shit legally, oh, you're done. You're toast. You're toast while I'm in college football.
But they're toast anyway, just because of recruiting. Like now, it's about buying.
Jimmy.
But before it was recruiting, he was already crushing everybody.
Jimmy, that's my point. Yeah. That's where they are so wrong in this scenario because it's already happening. So right now, their complaint, everybody's complaint about NIL is that that's how people are luring kids to the schools. We're flashing money in front of them, and we can't flash money in front of them to get them here. But you know what they did before NIL came out?
They flashed the money under the table.
No. I won't even go there.
Okay.
They flashed the money they spent on facilities. So they flashed to them, look how much better our facilities are Then this school, whose workout room do you want to use? Do you want to use the one at Akron, or do you want to use the one at Alabama? Right?
Yeah,
that's
a good point.
That's how they lure kids in. LSU got 100 and like, I can't remember the exact number off the top. It's between like 130, 150 million dollars from boosters to redo their locker rooms at the school. So basically, the kids never have to leave there. They got reclining seats with big screen TVs at every single locker. State of the art locker room, weight room, everything you can imagine. Alabama had a $600 million plan over 10 years to really invest in football and the school's facilities. Please explain to me what difference is it that the kids are getting the money instead of the schools? There's no difference. I don't care how you try to slice this. The way you recruit these kids was with money. You just diverted it somewhere else. Now the schools are still diverting that money there, but not as much. Why? Because instead of the boosters giving it to the school, they're finding a way to circumvent and give it to the kid, which to me is so much better because this is why. You can't give kids the money for going to play for a certain school, which is one rule that I agreed with. So if a kid signs with Alabama, they decide, you know, we're going to give you a $2 million deal, and they pull a Quinn Ewers, or whatever. Ewers. Quinn Ewers. I'm really bad at pronouncing names, even though I know them. Quinn Ewers, take the $2 million and bounce and go to another school. You can't do anything about it. So if you sign this deal with this kid and he decides to go there and say, you know, nah, I'm not getting any playing time because he wasn't going to beat CJ Stroud the way he was playing. He still got the money. He's gone to another school. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the beauty of that and the transfer portal.
Well, do you think maybe part of what Saban is saying is motivated a little bit by fear? And this is what I mean by that. If he knows that if, in a sense, recruiting is now going to turn into buying, and how universities have certain boosters or who own certain companies, brands, or whatever that can offer them the kind of money that they want to be making. And then if they can get a better deal here as opposed to here, then that's where they're going to go. If I can get a better deal at Alabama as opposed to Ohio State, then I'm going to go to Alabama, or vice versa. Do you think ultimately he's worried about that and he's becoming uncomfortable that this is what it's going to become? It's going to be teams literally outbidding each other, and that he knows that there are a few schools who can compete for that 5-star athlete in that regard in terms of just the kind of money that they have. You mentioned LSU. You mentioned your Ohio State, eventually USC, just a few, but that he's worried about losing recruits, getting outbid by these other schools that can compete with Alabama in that regard, and that's what he doesn't want to happen?
Maybe, but I mean, another school that everybody's terrified of right now is Jackson State. They got two top players to flip or decide not to go to these D1 schools and go play for Deion Sanders. So when you start getting coaches that have namesakes and that can actually coach, but also guide you into the league, it does take away from coaches like Saban and Kirby when it comes to the talent. Now, this is where NIL and the transfer portal come intertwined. Is that the biggest complaint is these kids are transferring. They don't know what they're doing. They're stuck in the transfer portal. They may not end up with homes. Yeah, there's situations where that will happen. But the problem is for these kids is that they know the thing about it is for them is that not the problem. The thing is they no longer have to sit behind somebody for 4 years before they get a chance to play if they don't want to. If they see that at another school, they have an opportunity to go play. They can go play today and prove themselves, because this is the thing. All those kids that went to Jackson State, if they can ball, guess what's going to happen? They're going to get drafted. They're going to get drafted. They're going to get drafted to the NFL. And so people that are trying to clown Deion say, hey, man, you guys are going to Jackson State. Why would you do that? You need to go D1. No, you don't. We've got players in the NFL right now that played at group of 5 schools. We got Aaron. I mean, you got all these top players that have played at these random schools. Yeah. Because if you're talented, you will go.
And ultimately, Jackson State, I mean, they play on ESPN now. Yes. But ultimately, they're going to start to get games slowly but surely as long as Deion stays there against these D1 schools and be able to compete because they are getting recruits like this. And then eventually they will be in there just like everybody else.
You know what it is? They don't even have to compete. If the kid's good and he's out there putting the blanket, perfect example. Cincinnati playing Alabama. I was listening to Joe Klatt talk to Ryan Russillo about this, and I thought this was a masterful way of pointing out why Cincinnati lost this game. It was all on coaching. It's coach's fault. Cincinnati has 2 corners on their team that are NFL prospects. Sauce Gardner, who is considered a top 10. I think he's the number 1 or number 2 corner on the draft boards right now, depending on whose board you're looking at. On one side, and you have the other corner, Kobe Bryant on the other side, who's considered a 2nd to 3rd round draft pick. They got shut down corners. How did Cincinnati lose that game against Alabama? They didn't let them be shut down corners. They ran their 3-3-5 defense, and they just let Alabama run down their throat. If they would have switched that and started going after the run and letting those two bookend corners do their jobs,
let them man up. Yeah.
They would have manned up and done a lot better. Now, their offense would have still struggled, but their defense would have kept Alabama from scoring 30-something points. It may have been like 15 to maybe 20, but the offense would have had more chances. They could have got more creative.
They were running a 3-3-5. Like even in Madden, you can't run a 3-3-5 and not expect to get run on.
Well, the thing is that Cincinnati, and Joe Clapp mentioned this, that Cincinnati was focused on stopping the pass, and this is what gave them the advantage against Bryce Young. Why Bryce Young struggled?
Yeah,
he doesn't see that defense very often. He's used to what Georgia runs, because in practice, only for a week he saw a 3-3-5. But every other week, he's practicing against Georgia's defense, which is why Alabama's going to win this national championship. Is because he sees their defense every day. Kirby Smart's from the Nick Saban tree. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway, my point, the transfer portal probably could change some things. I want to
continue the discussion about the transfer portal. Like, as I'm understanding it now and understanding the ramifications of them being able to do that, I think we need to table that for one of our shows coming up to really deep dive into the pros and cons and the intricacies of the transfer portal, and maybe ways, since we're talking about regulation, maybe ways, if so, that might need to be tweaked or regulated as well. But I've become a big fan of the transfer portal, but I've got questions about it though.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things about college football is the opportunity for kids to go somewhere and play.
It's exciting.
Today.
I mean, it literally is like free agency, and it's excited as we get about free agency in the NFL and the NBA. Now you can about college football.
Exactly. They're now being signed like everybody else, and once everybody tweaks their ratings where you can see the difference, boy. With that,